Yeah, that makes total sense. And one of the follow-on questions to that would be, how do they know where the line is between, like, it's not exactly a secret that we're giving them like loads of money, and at the same token, to maybe, like you said, less important, but we've kind of shown, I think, maybe to a lesser extent with the withdrawal in Afghanistan and some of our other actions, regardless of administration, that we're kind of, I guess, we're not enforcing the international norms as much as we used to. And so how much is there this like balancing act between showing like we're still here and we're still gonna like stand up for people, and at the same time not provoking into a more hot war with Russia? Because I think a lot of people here are, the people that I have spoken to that are in my age group, are kind of tired of us being in like random places all over the place, and like, oh, I had such and such friend that was a Marine and he was sent to insert random country here, and it's like, why are they like? So there's that sentiment as well. I get there's a lot in that, but kind of, I guess, to boil it down to one, how are they deciding what, or you might not, I mean, to speculate, how are they kind of towing the line of being, yes, we're still here, well, with public sentiment being as it is, without provoking at the same time? How is that balancing act kind of playing out? And how do you foresee it playing out as we continue? Because this doesn't look like it's going anywhere anytime soon.
Right, right, good. Um, well, so I think I would separate what you just asked into two parts. So there's
Mm-hmm.
part about how do you keep it from escalating, um, and where do you draw that line? And all we can really say is that, again, what they've done so far has seemed to have done a pretty good job of that. I mean, I don't think, from everything that I gather, we've gotten close to the point where there's a real risk that the US or NATO are going to get into direct conflict with Russia. If there was I think one of the things that's been important is, well, one that I said before, right, which is a limitation on not just a limitation on the kinds of weapon systems. So not giving Ukraine lots of things that they could use easily to go and attack Russia. So a lot of discussion, for example, earlier on about fighter jets. Well, that would allow you, right? That would be one thing. You can use them defensively, but you can also use them pretty easily offensively, right? So that's one possibility there in terms of the kinds of weapon systems um, that we're giving Ukraine, but also I think a lot of guidance to them saying, look, guys, behind closed doors, if you end up doing X, Y, and Z and you start blowing up targets in Russia, then we might have to reconsider a little bit. I suspect there's a lot of those conversations happening.
Is
So,
this acceptable for Russia, this level of aid at the moment?
I
Like,
mean,
we can't really tell, really.
exactly. That's a really good point. But it does seem like, in a way. So I guess let's imagine a couple different scenarios. Let's imagine a scenario where Ukraine suddenly starts to really essentially kick them out of all the parts of Ukraine that they currently control. Because currently Putin has sort of a face-saving, right? He's gained some territory relative to the start of the war. I think that might shift a little bit if things were going the other way in terms of his need to do something. I suspect this is because of the nuclear element to all of this, the fact that both Russia has nuclear weapons, but also the United States has nuclear weapons, that I think Russia is going to be real cautious in terms of what it does if it wants to signal that NATO or the West has gone too far. So if they get to that point, I think they're going to be pretty cautious in terms of how they do it. So one of the things that I've been expecting all along, for example, that hasn't really happened yet, is a stray missile or a stray plane ends up shooting down some either U.S. aircraft, or right. They've been pretty good at avoiding that sort of stuff. But if the Russians wanted to send a signal, they could do something kind of small like that to say, like, look, guys, you're hitting the limit here. There's probably some diplomatic exchanges along those lines as well. That's I would imagine and expect that that's the case. Now, on your other point, because I do think that there's something really important that needs to be said here as well, which is I and I've been saying this actually in a couple of different places for a while now. I suspect that your impression when you're talking to people your age is the broader societal reaction. So I don't think there's, I think that is exactly indicative of what's happening and what you said at the outset of the discussion about Ukraine, which is that over time, and we see this historically with crises like this, right? No matter how big something is at a particular moment, a foreign crisis, over time people get sick of it, right? Unless it's affecting them directly. And in this case, the only way it's affecting Americans directly is with higher gas prices, which they don't like, right? But it doesn't tell, in other words, that doesn't tell them to help Ukraine. That just tells them like, why the heck is this is it bothering me? Like, why do I keep having to pay more for gas, right? So, and I do think that moral outrage is going to continue to decline, right? We could expect it to continue to decline. And so over time, that's going to continue to erode the political support for US aid to Ukraine, right? You can get away with, and that's, as I said, yesterday, announcing another $1 billion. There's a day is going to come in the not too distant future where the Congress is going to say, right? And it might be, this is another important part of our landscape. So you've got the general public sentiment, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that's really important, I alluded to it before, is the Trump wing of the Republican Party now. And the way that they interpret or see the world, right, is through this quotes here, but America First lens, which from their perspective essentially says, if it's not directly serving our interest, then why are we doing it? Okay. Some of those people also tend to not see Russia as a threat so much. So I know there has been a bit of a split on the Ukraine question in the Republican Party, with some people taking a more, and particularly members of Congress, the House of Representatives, some people in the House taking more, some Republicans in the House taking a more kind of like, not my problem take on it, right? Well, let's imagine that Republicans win the midterm elections in November, and then they control a majority of the House. All this funding has to go through the House, so we could then expect there to be maybe less funding, because even if, let's say, half or 2/3 of the Republicans still are in favor of funding and they can get some Democrats behind them, right, they still probably are going to have to cut deals relative to other issues and those sorts of things. So I would expect over time, I think, first of all, the sentiment that you are, hearing among your friends is, and the sort of general kind of decline in terms of how much attention people are paying to this is going to continue, and that's going to over time erode the U.S. support for Ukraine.